Hello! JT Wheatley here, your friendly neighborhood host of the History of Comic Books podcast, back with a new episode on the history of the Jewish influence of comic books. It doesn't take much to realize how much influence Jews and the Jewish people had in comic books. Names alone from Eisner to Kurtzman show it from all nations and cultures. It did provide an influence on heroes having a secret identity to allow them to fit into society, whether it being Superman being Clark Kent or Bruce Wayne being Batman. In fact, Kal-El, Superman's Kryptonian name, means in Hebrew all that God is, while his human name, Clark Kent, is as Americanized as it can get. Granted, not all Jewish creators changed their names, such as Rube Goldberg and Will Eisner, along with Jack Leibowitz and Harry Donenfeld, the owners of the National DC Company, though Donenfeld didn't end up calling DC Donenfeld Comics instead of Detective Comics, as even he thought that was too Jewish for the company. Well, Eisner also went through a name change in real life with his younger brother Julian, who was, after bullies kept calling him Julian, started calling him Pete, which was detailed in his classic graphic novel To the Heart of the Storm. Well, Eisner would later say that they were peoples of the book, and many have argued that his greatest creation, Denny Colt the Spirit, looked Jewish. Eisner would always argue against this, and once said, "I'm a Jewish American like an Irish is an Irish American or an Italian is an Italian American." Another Jewish aspect of the Superman, as with many superheroes, was his relationship to the myth of the golem. According to Jewish folklore, a golem is a creature created from an inanimate matter, usually clay or mud, called upon to defend Jewish people from harm or oppression. In many versions of the story, the golem turns out to be worse than those it was called to protect against, using the story as an allegory to sometimes the solution can be worse than the problem. However, in other stories, the golem actually accomplishes its mission, being a hero to the Jewish people. Will Eisner, noted comic book legend and creator of the spirit, went on as far as to call the golem the early form of the superhero. This was also to put to great use in the Man of Steel number 80 to 82 in 1998 by John Bogdanove and Louis Simonson, and when Superman is transported back in time to Warsaw, Poland during World War II, where he defends the Jews in the ghetto. Two of those are hard to defend are Baral and Moshe, who were inspired by Superman's creators, Jerry Siegel and Joe Shuster, who in the story began drawing pictures in tribute of him. Another aspect that Superman followed in Jewish culture is his early pursuit of social justice, called Tikkun Olam, or healing the world in Hebrew. As oppressed people, it led to the Jews, like many others, to seek out whatever means to achieve it, with some turning to communism before learning of the horrors it would bestow upon the world. Harvey Kurtzman said himself that he was a red diaper baby growing up, while Jack Leibowitz started out as a socialist working as an accountant for a garments workers union before becoming the noted capitalist later in his life. Superman did the same early in his comic book career, as he first fought corrupt businessmen and politicians before moving on to supervillains like the Ultra-Human Knight in 1939. This change didn't stop others from noticing Superman's Jewish nature, as Joseph Goebbels, the Nazi minister of propaganda, would denounce him as being Jewish at a Reichstag meeting, leading to his comic being banned in Nazi Germany. An irony, considering that Superman's name would come from Übermensch, which came from the works of Friedrich Nietzsche, a German philosopher who believed this was a superior individual who overcame a corrupt society. The Nazis would later use this as the very idea to expose their Aryan beliefs. World War II and the Nazis would lead to a reaction from Jewish comic book creators as well, most notably with Captain America by Joe Simon and Jack Kirby, who created a blonde-haired, blue-eyed Aryan model who punched out Hitler on his debut cover. Plus, the scientist who created the super soldier serum that gave Steve Rogers his powers was named Professor Einstein, a nod to famed Jewish scientist Albert Einstein. The Jewish people were not just in comic books, though, as Fleischer Studios, the famed animation studio that would produce the classic Superman cartoons of the 1940s, were Jewish, while the Milk Gross Fund was founded in the honor of the famed cartoonist to help support fellow cartoonists. Milk Gross created the Yiddish-inflected newspaper comic book strip Baby, and in 1930 the book He Done Her Wrong is considered one of the first true graphic novels. Al Jaffe, a protege of Will Eisner, would describe Gross as a super Jew, or one of the few Jewish creators who found success in mainstream before World War II. With the passing of his father, Max Gaines, in a tragic boating accident on August 20th, 1947, his son, Bill Gaines, took over his comic book company, Educational Comics, EC, and promptly remade it into Entertaining Comics, focusing on crime, horror, and science fiction. However, Gaines would continue to use comics to educate, even in a socially aware manner. One notable issue was in Shock and Suspense Comics number 5 in October-November of 1952 by Al Feinstein and Wally Wood. In the story Hate, a young man, John Smith, works with his waspy neighbors to drive the Jews out of town. However, when Smith discovers he is in fact Jewish, his former friends turn on him and beat him to a pulp. Being Jewish and growing up oppressed, especially following the Holocaust, did make Jews more receptive to social causes for all people. Another classic issue, Weird Fantasy number 15 in the March-April of 1953 by Al Feinstein and Joe Orlando, the story Judgment Day revolves around an astronaut sent to the planet Cybernia to observe if its people are ready to join Earth's galactic republic. Noticing that the population of robots, the astronaut observes that the orange robots have segregated the blue robots into manual labor. Seeing this segregated society, the astronaut, whose name is Tarleton, states that they are not ready yet to join the Republic and will not until they learn to accept all peoples like Earth has. Then Tarleton takes his helmet off to reveal he is black. Most notably, he is not a racist stereotype of a black man, but a handsome, clearly intelligent one, a breakthrough considering the racist depictions from the previous decade. Ebony Knight from the Spirit, anyone? Much of this was due to Harvey Kurtzman, who refused to do racist depictions of any race with his artwork, even when doing crime and war comics like Two-Fisted Tales and Frontline Combat. When Kurtzman took over Mad from EC, which after the CCA was implemented would be the only magazine to survive from the company, and it would be peppered with Jewish references. The phrases Furchtlager, Smoltz, Oi, and Fey are featured throughout. He even parodied EC itself, such as Jock suspense stories with Genef, Yiddish of Thieves. In issue number 11, Murder of the Husband was written in Hebrew. In issue number 17, the magazine parodied the McCarthy hearings with the skit What's My Shine, illustrated by Jack Davis, turning it into a game show. This did bring out criticism, particularly from the Hartford Courant in 1954, in which an editorial said the comics came from the gold-plated sewers of New York, which was code name for being they were Jewish. That didn't stop Mad, though, which continued to set the standard for comic book satire ever since. In issue number 325 in 1994, What If Superman Was Raised Jewish? A skit in which you imagine a young Kal-El was discovered by Heinem and Doris Feldstein of Brooklyn, who named him Herman and raised him to become a doctor. Commenting on this, they say, "To think, we found him in some goyish spaceship." This will be a consistent theme throughout Mad magazine, such as in issue number 419 of July of 2002, in the strip What If Chris Rock Performed at a Bar Mitzvah by Drew Friedman, which satirized Jewish culture in general. During the Silver Age, superheroes began to see a revival in Jewish influence as well as superheroes in general. For instance, when the Guardians, who oversee the Green Lantern Corps, were created in Green Lantern Revival by Joe Kane and John Broome, they were modeled after the then Prime Minister of Israel, David Ben-Gurion. Kane and Broome also wanted to emphasize the racial and ethnic diversity of the Corps, being an all-inclusive organization. Marvel did the same thing during the Silver Age revival, particularly with the Fantastic Four and Ben Grimm the Thing. Jack Kirby, his co-creator, modeled his gruff-nosed nonsense personality after himself. His name is even based on him, with his middle name being Jacob, Kirby's birth name, and his first name being Benjamin, after his father. The Thing was meant to be an outsider and average Joe who grew up on Yancey Street, but Kirby never made him outright Jewish. He did make a personal sketch of him wearing a yarmulke with a menorah in the background. That would change, however, in Fantastic Four number 56, Volume 3, on August of 2002, in the story Remembrance of Things Past. Nice play on words there. By Carl Kessel and Stuart Iman, in which the Thing remembers his youth as Ben Grimm and having to steal a Star of David to join the Yancey Street Gang, a further tribute to Kirby, who ran with the Suffolk Street Gang in his youth. Thus, what was only implied by Kirby in his creation became canon today, as Ben Grimm, the Thing, is most definitely Jewish. Many would try to make connections with other Marvel creations like Spider-Man, though his origin could easily construed as Catholic with his original sin of letting his Uncle Ben die, something Michael Chabon pointed out in a 2004 interview in Newsweek. Though the Hulk is influenced by Frankenstein, which is a parable of heavy influence of the original Golem myth. Thus, Hulk is Jewish once removed. One Marvel creation that does have heavy Jewish influence, though, was the X-Men, originally conceived as a reflection of racial prejudice, with mutants standing in for skin color and ethnicity. It would further be emphasized when Chris Claremont took over the series in 1974. As a teenager, Claremont went to a kibbutz, a collective farming community in Israel, in 1969. There he met Holocaust survivors and watched movies like Judgment at Nuremberg. This greatly influenced his view on the world and his writing on the Uncanny X-Men. In issue number 104, in April of 1977, he made Magneto Jewish and a Holocaust survivor himself. Then in issue number 129, in January of 1979, he introduced a new Jewish mutant girl of his own liking, Kitty Pryde Shadowcat. She was inspired by a beautiful IDF, Israeli Defense Forces officer, which Gal Gadot, the actress who plays Wonder Woman, also served in. He met in Tel Aviv. Claremont was smitten that she looked so beautiful even while carrying an Uzi, and he wanted to bring a woman like that into the X-Men. Claremont also wanted to introduce a new teenage character since the original X-Men were now adults, and he needed somebody he could personally relate to. Kitty Pryde's Jewish faith would be a significant factor in her character, and she was frequently shown wearing a Star of David necklace, which helped her repel a vampire, like the cross does in other stories, and with her faith, and in Uncanny X-Men number 159. She also bonded with Magneto over her Jewish heritage in Uncanny X-Men number 199 on November of 1985, in which they go to a Holocaust memorial together. It was at this point Magneto had reformed and was now leading the X-Men in Professor X's absence. There, Magneto met fellow Holocaust survivors who knew Magneto when he was a young boy and shocked to discover he is still alive. However, when Magneto was exposed as a mutant, they are immediately recoiled against him, with Claremont demonstrating those who experience the horrors of racism can still practice it. Most recently, Kitty Pryde and her wedding issue with Colossus is shown very clearly she's being married by a rabbi and having a proper Jewish wedding. At DC, another character with significant Jewish heritage was created with Ragman. Originally created by Joe Kubert and Robert Kaniger in 1976, Ragman was just a well-trained human, Rory Reagan, who made a costume out of rags and fought criminals in the ghetto, or the tatterdemalion of crime. It wasn't until 1991 to 92 when Keith Giffen, Robert Loren Fleming, and Pat Broderick reimagined him in Ragman in the 8-issue miniseries as a magically powered superhero in which each patch of his costume represents the soul of an evil villain. Regan was revealed to be the apprentice of Rabbi Eloria, and his costume has been passed down through the generations in Emet, Hebrew for truth, essentially a DC version of the Golem. Regan inherited the costume from his father, Jerry Reganowitz, shortening his name to Regan as many Jewish immigrants had, including the comic book creators, who failed to protect the Jews of the Warsaw Ghetto when fire was revealed to be his weakness. When Rory, the rabbi, tells him it's the ragman's duty to protect his people and to inspire hope. But there is no hope left in the world. Like Superman and the Hulk, Ragman will be a superhero spin on the Golem, though one not even his original creators, Kubert and Kaniger, intended. DC also saw another significant Jewish influence when Jack Kirby came over in the 1970s to create his New Gods universe. With Mr. Miracle number 1 on March-April of 1971, Jack Kirby revealed the origin of Mr. Miracle Scott-Free to be the son of Highfather, a Moses-like being of New Genesis, who in a bid for peace with the planet Apocalypse was traded with its leader, Darkseid's son, Orion. Like many superhero origin stories, it replicated the story of Moses, who was raised as a royal in the Egyptian family before being revealed to be Jewish. Kirby also used his war experience and personal hatred for Nazi Germany as inspiration for the villains, with names like Darkseid, Vermin Volodora, and Steppenwolf, while the War of Apocalypse evokes Nazi Germany. One work camp on the planet has the slogan, "Work is life, death is freedom," similar to the sinister slogan, "Work will make you free," over the Auschwitz concentration camp, complete with war refugees, which Kirby personally experienced seeing during his service in the European theater. In addition, Darkseid's son, Orion, was bred to be a super soldier, similar to Nazi breeding programs. As Kirby's partner, Stan Lee at Marvel, once said, in a twisty way, the Nazis were a great way to help comic books, as every hero needs villains, and the Nazis were the worst villains of all. In fact, in Mr. Miracle number 13, Scott Free would capture an actual Nazi war colonel, Albert von Killowitz. While the New Gods comic books were not initially successful, they would lay the groundwork for many of the best stories in future DC comic books, with DC in particular with Darkseid in particular becoming one of the line's most powerful villains. When this was adapted in the classic Superman the Animated Series of the 1990s, they also introduced another character from the comic books, Detective Dan Terrible Turpin, a cop with whom the animator is modeled after Jack Kirby in tribute to him. When he is killed by Darkseid in the episode Apocalypse Now, Turpin is later given a Jewish funeral. It wasn't the only mainstream comics that saw Jewish influence, as the comics genre was about to contribute one of the most important comics, let alone Jewish ones, in history. In 1972, Funny Animals, number 1, featuring a 3-page story by Art Spiegelman, that would lay the basis for his future classic Mouse. He was recruited by Terry Ziegler for the story, with the only condition that the characters had to be anamorphic.